dance like a monkey. Move, 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 move like a monkey. Shoot, 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 shoot like a monkey. Kill, 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 kill like a monkey. Dance, 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 dance like a monkey. Move, 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 move like a monkey. Shoot, 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 shoot like a monkey. Kill, 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 kill like a monkey.
Hello?
Hey, sorry. Give me one moment.
There we go. How are we all tonight?
I'm doing okay. I'm having issues on my end with technology, as usual, but
So, to answer your question, Vodka, whatever happened to that other stream? It is being reconsidered in light of additional information. We might still do What If All This, but the other parts of it. I wanted to tonight do something a little bit different because some people have asked me to be calling it Two Guys Talking History if who's talking is always dataless. And that's a fair question.
that is a fair question considering my
As you can
body
see,
attendance records.
As you can see, Hetman is real. I have let him out of the closet. Allowed to talk this evening.
Give me one moment, too. I need to get on the YouTube stream, actually, to see if there's any questions coming.
Oh, not yet. Getting there. And I thought we'd talk about some stuff tonight. Casual. Doesn't actually. Maybe take some call-ins and do, because there is something that happened today on Twitter, Hetman. I think it involves someone you like.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Who is it?
Dr. Bjorn.
Really?
Yes.
So what happened?
So, Dr. Waitman Bjorn is a Holocaust scholar, a fairly influential one. He posted a thing about another Twitter account on history called History Speaks, which you might be familiar with. We've at least President Sunday's talked about them in the past. Jake Shields, Holocaust denier and anti-Semite, put out a call to have people debate Holocaust, to which History Speaks inadvisedly decided they wanted to do. Dr. Bourne turned around today and put out a quote tweet: "Don't do this. Bad idea. Historians don't debate Holocaust denial." Holocaust denial is a belief, not a historical position, based on faith, not evidence. You'll never convince someone to not be a denier because denial is not a rational historical position.
He's absolutely right.
Historical debates are great, but denial is outside the boundaries of debate. It grants false legitimacy to the deniers. It gives the denier exactly the engagement they're looking for. And he acknowledges that public engagement by scholars is important, but that this is not the way to do so. Yeah, my microphone's being bad tonight. I'm moving it much closer to my face. And that's an excellent point, Paul Fletcher. Talking about the Benny Morris and Mehdi Hassan debate, I assume is the Lex Friedman podcast of Destiny you're referring to. So here's my question to you, Hetman.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
Do I agree with Dr. Waitman Bjorn?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with him wholeheartedly. I don't think anyone who is a Holocaust denier should be given a platform. And actually engaging them in a debate, it's not going to convince them one way or another, but it's going to give them a platform. It's going to also sort of give their followers something to be proud of. And I think, yeah, you don't give people like that a platform. Of course, there's a famous case with who was the I should know this, but who was the person who died recently? David Irving, right?
Yes, the Holocaust denier who died. Actually, I
Yes.
deny that he died. He didn't actually die. He's still alive. But carry on.
Yeah. So, there's a famous case of, I think, him versus Hannah Arendt, if I'm not mistaken.
Hannah Arendt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's maybe one sort of example where you have that occur, but I mean, that is sort of the Holocaust. I mean, denial and justification of the Holocaust happened, long before David Irving. And I think the thing with Holocaust denial is, there's no one that denies it per se, but they deny the severity of it. They downplay it and essentially, try to even justify it.
Well, I think part of the problem is that it falls under the category of those kinds of people like David Irving are just asking questions, and they're not.
Yeah.
I saw a couple people try to claim today that Holocaust denial is primarily a matter of ignorance rather than a matter of hate. I don't think I believe that. I've never seen a person deny the Holocaust who wasn't trying to be hurtful to Jews.
I would agree with you on that. I mean, that's the most people who are deniers of it, they're sort of, they're trying to find a way to justify it in some way. And that's the reason why I agree with Dr. Bjorn, because I don't think that people who deny genocide should be given a platform. I mean, there's cases, for example, where one can debate a ruling on genocide. I think we've talked about the Srebrenica case.
Yes.
And but I mean, on the Serb side, there's absolute denial of it, that it ever happened, that the atrocity itself, not not mind you, like genocide happened. And they've actually, it's very interesting to go on sort of their to actually look up sort of Serb explanations of what occurred. And their explanations are usually, justifying it. So, for example, all those unarmed men were somehow trying to escape detention within Serbian lines, and they went through checkpoint and checkpoint, and the forcing the pro Republika Srpska army to fire on them. So that's like literally the one explanation that I found. So that's like an example of blatant denial of a atrocity. It doesn't deny that those people were missing, that they're dead, but it like comes up with a really outlandish justification as to why it happened, and that's just one of many that exist. With the Holocaust, for me, and like like as a historian, it's very hard to find a event that is as well documented.
Right. It is.
As the Holocaust, it is extremely well documented.
Well, for one
and
thing,
it's documented
the Germans took notes.
by the perpetrators. Yeah. And granted, it's not to say that the Germans didn't try to cover up their crimes. There were many instances in which they did. A lot of the cases that I deal with, for example, like the best documents that would have existed on it were burned during the retreat. So, there is an attempt to cover up crimes like that, but because of the magnitude of the crime, you really can't conceal it. And it's coming from a force that believes that it is sort of their historical mission and duty to carry this out. So, there's no real effort in a lot of cases, not in every case, but there's not a whole lot of effort that goes into trying to destroy evidence of it. So the evidence is overwhelming.
Yes.
There's no denying it.
But the larger question,
and that's
right?
actually
The larger question,
and this
is and I want to talk about the conversation you and I had back about a couple months ago about the destiny debate with Finkelstein and Hassan and Benny Morris. So you and I were talking, and you had watched the debate independent of me because I watched it with President Sunday and reacted to it live. But you was like, your first question was, "Who the hell is Destiny?"
Yeah, no, I was really pissed that Lex Friedman, and granted, I mean, you can have whatever opinion of him that you want, but I thought him to be a bit smarter than to pair these three groups of scholars. And I'm even gonna like say, was it who's the Israeli historian that was with them? I forget his name.
Benny Morris.
I know he's written. Yeah, but, I mean, even Benny Morris, like, deserves someone better, on his end. As much as I disagree with him, like, I don't even know what the hell he was doing there. And you can tell just the difference in seriousness of these people. Like, you can tell who the hack is in the room because he goes in there wearing a fucking like hoodie. You know what I mean? Like, everybody else is dressed in at least a button-up shirt, if not a suit. They're carrying themselves very professionally, and honestly, like my favorite part of that whole debate was just watching Finkelstein just
Destiny
rip
alive.
on him, just his ad hominem attacks on Destiny, because he deserved it, and in a sense he's right. I mean, Finkelstein's right. Like, it's kind of like, okay, so someone who does very cursory research. Finkelstein's a person who's been studying the Gaza conflict and Israel-Palestinian conflict basically the good part of his whole life, and he's in his 60s, and you get a person who is a lot younger and whose knowledge of it is extremely just cursory, but he has a very big mouth, and he's given a platform. As an academic, I hate people like Destiny. Like, they should not have a space
You
or
know,
a spot at the table.
do you know what Destiny did before?
Um,
Before he was I guarantee you don't. It's going to make you mad.
I don't think I know, but I heard something really disturbing about him.
You're going to hear a lot of very disturbing things about Destiny. He's a disturbing individual. But his original claim to fame is being a StarCraft II professional player.
Really?
Yes. Was a StarCraft, while StarCraft II was a major esport, he was a StarCraft II player. After that, he got into political streaming, where he sits and he just shoots his mouth off all day.
Wow.
He didn't even know where Israel was. Couldn't find it on a map prior
I
to
mean,
October 7th. He confused Turkey with Israel. He confused Erdogan with Netanyahu.
oh Jesus! Why the hell did Lex Friedman?
Because he has something on the order of 800,000 subscribers. Also, today I learned that Lex Friedman is 5'4". He shouldn't be making a podcast. He should be up on a fucking tree making.
I mean, you don't have to. I mean, like, I'm not gonna get on him over his height. I do have some respect for him. But yeah, that's besides the point. Like, he really fucked up that, and I think it actually is reflective too of him as a person to a degree. Like,
Well, it was bringing in someone for clout.
yeah.
The problem is here's the
To
principal
get
problem.
more likes to the video, I mean, to get it more exposure, but couldn't you pick someone a little bit better? I even think someone like Tucker Carlson, as bad as he is, would have been better than Destiny. At least he's at a higher level of bullshitting.
Goes deeper. He was started as streaming after crashing his 401k. I think his only job was 3 or 4 years at a car wash. Well, tomfoolery invented the car wash. Streamers are idiots. The problem, though, that I have with, especially in the case of Israel, we have this that people are denying the events of the crisis even as we watch them unfold. You have an entire cottage industry basically around uplifting Israel when they're doing some pretty heinous shit, to be honest. It's a deeply disturbing situation at the end of it, because we're never going to find out the full extent of what happened. I think. Okay, you're back. We just lost everyone. Got him back.
What happened?
Crap out. I think it's a disaster that we're never going to find out what's happened. And I was deeply impressed with Mehdi Hassan in that debate. Finkelstein was kind of an asshole, but
Finkelstein is an asshole.
he is like a personal asshole, to be sure, but it was very much on display. I think the real pro gamer move in that particular case was to not talk to Destiny at all. Just direct all your discussion towards Benny Morris. Just go, who are you? because it would have highlighted the fact that you're not talking with somebody who's really focused in on the issues. And particularly in a case like Israel that's been so heavily obfuscated by the retelling of events, especially the last 20 years. So, or the last 24 years, I guess, in this. Like, have all these bad actors who are paying lip service, supporting his order to further political.
You know who I wish that he would have brought on that podcast? And maybe actually even instead of Finkelstein. But I think Finkelstein he's a person who has more of a following, and a lot of it has to do with, you know, how like his controversial removal from DePaul as a professor over his positions. And actually just in general, like, you know, he wrote a lot of, like, his book, the Holocaust Industry, was a very controversial book. I think not a terrible book, by the way, because there is sort of an industry of it, of sort of, you know, milking it. And he's a person, I think, who is in a unique position where he can write about that because both his parents are Auschwitz survivors. But I really wish they would have, maybe Lex Friedman would have brought on, like, Omer Bartov, who's an amazing scholar of the Holocaust and also a pretty outspoken critic of Israel on, you know, on this whole recent Gaza conflict, the recent iteration of it, and actually going even further back. And generally, I find he would have been his academic style of debate is a lot, and sort of confronting people with the truth is a lot more akin to the Palestinian scholar that he had on. I forget his name.
Rabini.
Yeah, Rabini. Bartov is much more similar in that regard, and I think he could equally tear apart Benny Morris. Destiny had no place being on there at all.
No, Destiny is.
Like, I think it's a little bit better than having, say, like a Holocaust denier, but it's, you know, he had no place in that discussion. He brings nothing to the table other than the fact that he has a huge internet following, and I guess, like, you know, he's a representative of sort of like that right-wing political bent.
Destiny, no, Destiny claims he's a liberal. He is not. He claims he's a liberal, but you'd hardly know it actually by listening to him talk. Right? One of his more famous gaffes, I guess not a gaffe, but one of his more famous outbursts is saying that BLM protesters should be shot. Another one is he once plotted the murder of someone who was DDoSing his stream, trying to do denial of service attacks on his stream, live on stream. Like, this is not a pleasant individual. I've called him a garden variety. So the idea that he becomes a representative of discourse is, like, repulsive on a kind of basic level. Like, not a good.
Oh man. I would actually like to see Dr. Bjorn engage in a debate with someone, because I feel like he'd be very, very good at it.
He's running his podcast. That's
No, his podcast is completely dedicated to Holocaust and genocide studies. Usually, you know, interviewing other scholars about their new monographs and books, articles on the Holocaust, which to me is a much more enjoyable endeavor than hosting a sometimes asinine slugfest between what's supposed to be between scholars, and, you know, they just happen to invite a garden variety schmo like Destiny on there. I think it's just really stupid. He's been on Pairs too recently.
Yes, Piers Morgan, who doesn't know what a woman is, apparently. That whole controversy from last week.
Oh yeah, okay,
The
yeah, about
Olympic boxer.
the Algerian, yeah.
I'll tell you
Oh
what.
man,
I'll tell you what about that. I watched that fight after it was brought up to be so traumatic. The who she was fighting, the opponent, dropped her hands. I think she was just traumatized because as a cop, she's not used to people being allowed to fight back.
probably not. I mean, I'm not very familiar with policing in Italy, so I can't really.
Well, I know a little bit about boxing, and you just don't drop your hands. If you drop your hands, you're going to get hit. You are going to get hit. It's going to hurt.
Of course,
Like, you will get hit in the face. Don't do it. Keep your hands up. Move. What actually she did is she launched a very wild swing, and because she launched a wild swing, she left herself open. That's probably a more fair description of what happened.
and that's how you lose in boxing.
Yes,
That is how you get hit.
Lucy recently covered the Prager Destiny debate. I don't want to do the Prager Destiny debate. I don't want to see Dennis Prager on screen with Destiny. I think they're both horrible for American discourse. The other one I want
Dennis
to
Prager is a founder of that neocon Prager Institute, right?
Prager University, Prager U.
Or Prager University, yeah.
They've had exactly one guest, and it was a colonel talking about the Civil War being caused by slavery, and I'm amazed the guy did the show in uniform, which was
I remember watching one Prager University video where they were talking to the guy who wrote a book called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels.
yep, that sounds about
Yeah,
right.
pretty stupid.
Basically, Prager U
I
exists.
remember watching a few and being like, okay, this isn't that terrible. They did one with the author actually of Armies of Sand, which I find to be a very good book. And why Arab armies have not been cohesive and have sort of not done well militarily. I don't know what the reasoning was to have them on, but I remember liking that episode in particular because I did enjoy the book.
Well, Prager U functionally exists to just automatically like try to negate anything that anyone ever wants to do that's progressive, ever. Like, oh, you want women to wear pants? Well, here's why not wearing dresses will destroy society. And they'll get
Yeah, there's a lot of alarmist videos like that. I do remember that happening.
yeah, it's now it's in classrooms, gotten themselves put in classroom, which is gonna be a disaster.
No, that's Jordan's top diplomat visits Iran, urging escalation to end.
Well, Jordan has a natural desire not to see Iran and Israel fight because then Jordan and Iraq
Well, they're right in the middle of that missile
get
path.
turned into a rugby field.
Yeah.
I don't think Israel or Iran's going to let this one go again, though. I don't think they can. Iran has to respond because, again, Israel keeps violating their sovereignty. They don't really have a choice. They have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah.
Their sovereignty. Honestly, if any, I was just actually talking with my father about it. Like, if I were to plan an attack, like a military operation against Iran, I would focus on only Revolutionary Guard infrastructure. Because I feel like at this point, maybe not, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like at this point, their days like the days of the regime, if they're given if the people are given any sort of power and means to resist, I think that regime would collapse.
I suspect you're right, but Israel also doesn't find that to be advantageous. They want Iran to exist in a weakened state to be a cat's paw for them.
Of course.
Hi, could someone explain if does Hamas get most? The line about Hamas getting support from Iran is at best minimum. Like maybe a little monetary support. They get most of their material aid from Egypt's military and their intelligence. Iran,
which is a little odd, because considering that Israel and Egypt have formal treaties.
Yeah, but I get the impression that Egypt doesn't trust Israel, which is probably a good policy.
I don't know if that's coming from like the very top though, or if or if it's like the Pakistani ISI, where you have various factions that operate sort of independently with like the Pakistani military in general, not just their intelligence branch, but I mean, there was a reason why they were protecting bin Laden for a long time, actually. So, like, I've talked to people, some of my friends about that, Pakistani friends, who've said that they have theories that, like, some particular colonel or general within the Pakistani army was, protecting him.
Why the fixation? Why the fixation on Iran then from Israel? Well, the reason that Israel is fixated on Iran is they want the war. They do not want to. They do not want to have a long. They would need an enemy. Israel is. There's deep divides in Israeli society, and they very much need enemies to be able to function. Like you look at what's happened for Netanyahu in the wake of October 7th, he's probably reversed his political fortunes. He's probably going to get reelected because of all of this and what's happened.
It's the right in Israel that needs that. It needs that external enemy.
Yes, the Israeli right. And like, to be clear, Likud, which is Netanyahu's political party, they're a far right political party by any means. They are expansionists. They're like Greater Israel extends to the Euphrates type nonsense. They are perfectly happy to engage in ethnic cleansing. They're horrible people, but the Israeli Liberal Party also isn't that great either. Both of them have expanded the settlements in direct violation of international. They've done that to sabotage the peace process. The Netanyahu is a particular jerk who's been prime minister of Israel 4 times, and each time has been disastrous for Palestinians. Yeah, they're going to go into Lebanon. They're probably going to get their asses kicked. I saw reports that Shin Bet is setting up bunkers for government officials, probably because they know that if they go into Lebanon, they're going to get hit by so many rockets they'll run out of interceptors for Iron Dome. They'll come screaming to us so the American people can pay for Israel's warmongering.
Yeah, that's the big issue is Hezbollah has amassed so many rockets that they fire a large enough barrage, they can overwhelm the Iron Dome system. The question is, though, is whether or not is how long they could keep that up before actually Israeli aircraft and artillery silences a lot of the rocket teams.
Well, they're getting good at it. They have practice. It'll be a bloodbath. Like, don't get me wrong. When Israel enters Lebanon, and it's mostly going to be civilians again, because Israel has no compunction about not murdering civilians. They're almost Russian in that regard. My understanding is Egypt, but the Philadelphia Accords and still just trust Israel. Also reference to a Greater Israel and claims on the Sinai. Yeah, the Sinai is included in part of that Greater Israel. It's illegal by international law to expand territory through conquest, which we usually honor as the United States, except in Israel, where we make a special exception to allow them to hold on to the Golan Heights and Gaza and the West Bank. Yeah, too many Americans will still shout, Israel did nothing wrong, guys. Yeah, no, exactly. That's the problem. That's kind of what's getting into my concerns about Kamala Harris picking Josh Shapiro, among other things. That sounds like it's going to be a mistake. It sounds like it's what's going to happen. But if she picks Josh Shapiro for vice president, that'll be a mistake. You've been paying attention to that aspect of it?
Have I? I've been avoiding that.
Josh Shapiro is currently governor of Pennsylvania, so it's a swing. I think she can win Pennsylvania with that. But this guy, when he was a prosecutor, sat on a case of a friend. Fiance died after being stabbed 20 times in the back, and it was ruled a suicide. Yeah, it would be a really bad idea for Kamala Harris to. I think, yeah, that there is a lot of stuff coming out about him. I think.
They share a background in.
Yeah, but I think that's what makes it worse to pick him, because if they pick
that's
him,
what makes it worse, because there's a lot of people that have crap against her too in California.
Yeah, but it undermines her record to bring him on board.
Her record as DA isn't that great.
Well, anyone's better than Trump. I'm cautiously optimistic. I've seen the polls switch Kamala Harris. It's early yet. I don't care about the polls particularly until after the convention. The Democrats decided to go second, which was a really good idea. And J.D. Vance turned out to be very weird. Very weird. The dude gets up on a podcast and says, yeah, I was waiting for a call from Trump, and my son was talking to me about Pokemon cards, and he wouldn't stop talking to me about Pokemon cards. And I told my son, shut the fuck up about Pikachu, or I talk to Donald Trump. And he said this. He said this out loud. It's like, do you think that story makes you look good? That you're a jackass to your son? Your son's going to put you in a nursing home, dude.
Oh, my God.
And that's on top of the rumors, apparently, that he decided to have intercourse with a couch. And he looks like the kind of guy who would have sex with a couch. He does. J.D. Vance is a weird little shit.
Wait. He had intercourse. Okay, so in his adolescence, he humped a couch, or like watching some. What is this?
This is a rumor. It's apparently been disproven, but he wrote about in Hillbilly Elegy, his book where he's not actually a hillbilly or giving an elegy for that he had sex with a. It's stuck because he's just that weird.
I mean, I thought Mike Pence was weird too.
Mike Pence was weird.
Yeah.
Mike Pence's political career was over. It was over, and then Donald Trump picked him to be vice president.
Yeah. He was a shitty governor of Indiana.
Look, we're both from Illinois and are disinclined to like Indiana to begin with. No offense, Palm Dad.
I mean, I have a soft spot for Bloomington.
Yes,
Spent some good years there.
Yeah, you had fun in college, good. But like the rest of Indiana sucks.
It does.
I'm also
but it grows on you.
That they kept trying to charge me to get into Indiana, and I wasn't even trying to get into Indiana. I was going through Indiana to get into Michigan to see my family. Come on.
Oh, you mean the toll roads?
Yes.
You're talking about the Skyway.
Yes, the Skyway. One time I didn't take the Skyway and drove through the back roads of Indiana. I'm pretty sure I actually visited Narnia.
You visited Narnia where people were missing teeth,
Yes. The lamp
which I hate to
post
say that.
was rusted. The lamp post was rusted.
Palm, Dad, the most disturbing place I've ever been through was a place called Paragon, Indiana. And that is a place that you just look at it and you see how left behind it is, and you understand how Trump actually has the chance to win, because like, you know, how he was able to win in 2016 and then how he could win this time around, because it's almost Ukraine level of like economic like just like infrastructural decay and economic backwardness. I don't know what else to say. I'm tired.
Yeah, well, no.
Yeah, Paragon's more than just Rust Belt. It's like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's
Well,
sad.
that occurs in Illinois too, right? Once you get
It
south of
does.
I-80, you're in the land God forgot, Illinois. Like the South
Yeah.
starts actually very quickly in just south of Chicago. But that, like, it speaks to like this kind of concept of people being alienated from the supposed progress of society. Like, prosperity hasn't come to these places. The farming communities have been ravaged.
In a post-industrial society, here's the big question is, in a post-industrial society, how do you bring prosperity back to those communities that were reliant on manufacturing jobs?
Or agriculture jobs. Agriculture jobs have been consolidated into massive company farms for corporations.
Of course.
Like, these places do not have access to a lot of the self-reliance that they build their mystique on is just gone. So what happens is Walmart comes in, Target, or big box store, give us these tax breaks. And like the town becomes this place where everyone works at Target and buys all their shit from Target, and then Target eventually goes, "Oh, this isn't profitable anymore," and closes the store.
It's usually a Walmart.
Yeah, it's usually
never
Walmart,
really see
not
Target
Target,
there.
but it's Walmart more often than not.
Yeah.
And like
Target's a little too bougie for Paragon.
They're just these places that it's hard.
I will say that the Walmarts that I've seen in like rural Indiana, they're somehow very, very nice though. They're well cleaned, well maintained, because the people there are really kind of just clinging to, you know, having a job there.
Yeah.
That's not the case for the Walmart in my suburb.
Yeah,
it's horribly managed.
Oh,
and
that one's always been a mess. So like since it's open, I remember what happened.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad Walmart. It's actually so bad that I know some people who worked at a you know, on the administrative end at another store in a different suburb, who said when things were going wrong at their store, they said, "Well, at least we're not that store," referring to our Walmart or your former Walmart.
Well, yeah, that's it. Like, there's no capitalist policy answer for those kinds of problems. You're gonna have to start decentralizing people's ownership of things. You're gonna have to say you can't own all this. It's causing a societal problem. We're gonna fix that by screwing you over a little bit. That's kind of what has to happen. At the end of the day, you're gonna have to stop the centralization and the mass pursuit of wealth. You're gonna have to say you can earn this much, and after that, you get taxed. 90% tax on profits again. Things like we did in the 1950s that made society have the engine to work, that encouraged responsible growth, that encouraged responsible investment. There isn't really a capitalist answer to the question. You're going to have to accept lower levels of capitalism if you don't want your entire society to collapse. Well, it's not just a late Roman Republic problem, right? It's a problem that occurs again and again. It occurred in Sparta. It's how Sparta collapsed. The centralization of wealth and this accumulation of wealth over the needs of the society. It creates an instability. It causes for you problems.
It's unsustainable.
Yes, you cannot have forever growth. You have to eventually tell people to chill the hell out. It's just how it works. At the end of the day, you can't build a society that cannot build a society where everyone can have a slice of the pie if the pie keeps being taken by a smaller and smaller group of people. It's
The
just,
WION News Network, sorry for interrupting this, is running a live story, NATO versus Russia to run into a big, bold war. Russia develops doomsday drone to prepare for worst case scenario. Is this like some Metal Gear or something?
no, that's the plot of Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah. Which is an amazing movie, by the way.
I've actually shown it in VC. Doctor Strange. How I learned to stop worrying and bomb. Classic movie. Not gonna go versions.
I don't see the big board.
Can't fight in here. This is a war room. Ein Führer, I can walk. Oh, it's and I wish there was a way we could better movies. Guests outside of.
Is that movie public domain yet? I don't think it is.
I Atkinson's viewer. No, it's not. 76. To public domain. I don't want the AI. Stop. 95 years or 70 years. Disney, stop it. Stop it, Disney. We have the worst copyright laws in this country. This. Yep, we are not 95.
Oh wow, that's actually, I thought it was in the 1950s. It was filmed, but yeah, the early 60s makes sense, I guess.
Hi, Maya Atkinson. Bad Science Sunday just got out, I guess. Gonna be a good time. I'll actually be on that show next week, the 11th. It'll be fun. I'm not sure what we're doing yet. I haven't been told, but I said I'd do it, so I'm doing it. You guys been following Venezuela chaos? I've been following it a little bit.
Yeah, I've been really, I just a little bit. I really haven't been.
The problem with Venezuela is like I get discouraged because on one side you have Jackson Hinkle, and on the other side you have Elon Musk. It's like, oh look, two assholes are fighting, and I don't want anything to do with it. But there has been some election contention. I'm like, the problem I have with trying to follow that is you have to go look at it in depth, and I haven't. Figure out what the hell is actually happening, because everyone, it's very popular these days to yell about election fraud. And it's very hard unless you're like directly involved in the election to know what's happened. So we end up in that kind of weird state where you don't know who is telling the truth, particularly when the people who are talking about it are all known liars. The problem that Venezuela has, though, like this is probably a good point to pay. The problem that Venezuela has is not really due to socialism; it's mostly due to sanction, and the sanctioning of Venezuelan goods. sanctions are an incredibly dangerous international weapon, right? Because they don't,
You
they
you
don't,
can ask Cuba about that.
yeah, they don't really hurt the guys who like, oh, we were sanctioning Cuba because Fidel Castro's a communist asshole. Fidel Castro was
No,
not really
it hurts. It
inconvenient.
hurts. It hurts regular Cubans. It doesn't hurt any
Yeah,
leadership.
Maduro did a bad job, but the thumbs on the scale doesn't help. Yeah, well, people believe for no reason is here's one of the things that I think is important to talk about in the light of like what's happening with the Olympics. First with the opening ceremonies, everyone is like, "Oh, they're mocking the Last Supper," and it was actually like a famous French painting that they were invoking, or this boxing. Oh, they're transvestigating the boxers now, which is a Russian con job, by the way, by Russian oil company. People will say, "Oh, you can't trust traditional media anymore." The line between traditional media and this new media that we are a part of is blurry. I don't think they're as separated as they used to be. For example, we're talking about Destiny on Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, for however worthless he is arguably traditional media. And he spent the entire week claiming that this boxer was a man from Algeria. Like, on top of that being incredibly dangerous, um, the line isn't there anymore. Like, I try to conduct this program with a sense of media ethics as best as I'm able. Not having journalists, but not a lot of people do that with their internet. Yeah, it's a Russian dismissal campaign because she went to Russia and beat a Russian boxer in an event sponsored by Gazprom, the oil company, oil and natural gas company in Russia. And that is the sole information being used to claim she's a man by basically the worst people alive again. Like people like Riley Gaines, the swimmer who lost, who's made a career out of losing, and then whining about the athlete who tied with her being. The trouble is, we are now in a media environment that rewards people being cynical. I think it was Maya Angelou who said, "I pity the young cynic who has gone from knowing nothing to." Um, Cynicism is being substituted for skepticism in this kind of media environment. That so people are really eager to not be following the man, the mainstream media, or the MSM, and our credulity has gone down. We're very willing to believe anything anyone tells us as long as we don't think it's me. And that's a dangerous place to be because we live like in a place where we can spread a rumor that a woman is a man without ever verifying it and stick to it as a matter of a culture war icon for no other reason than it makes us feel good. And then to think that we're righteous and justified in doing it is so it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to walk into this environment and want to and to know that
Aren't
everything could go to
Olympic
shit.
committees pretty thorough in their screening of, for example, of like athletes,
Yeah.
in regards to, drugs, or if they might, you know, have some sort of extreme natural, unfair natural advantage over someone,
Well, look at there are
like
cases of
say
like
like a say like assigned male at birth or something. Like
no,
I've never heard of that.
it's not really a thing. Like look at Simone Biles. She's such a good gymnast that they have to reinvent gymnastics to be able to accommodate the crap she does. Like she's phenomenally good. It's it
Yeah.
like no one's talking about her having some kind of weird advantage.
No, no, not at all.
But like they will, because the people who are trans are a culture war thing. And so for the other thing that happened this week that was buck wild, Kyle Rittenhouse, the not
Oh my
murderer,
God.
goes, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump because he's not good in the Second Amendment. It took less than 24 hours before Republicans started transvestigating him and saying that he's a woman.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Are you
Michael Phelps
serious?
is a freak of nature. Oh yeah, not to mention he wussed out within 12 hours. Like, over the last 12 hours, I've had many productive conversations with Team Trump. Like, yeah, they slapped you around a little bit.
Gee boy.
Yeah. So like these things happen in a blink of an eye, and they get amplified, and it doesn't matter. Like, and these are environments where truth doesn't matter, or to a certain extent.
This is
Like,
not my Twitter profile. I'm sorry.
you're sitting there trying to hold up a light of truth, uh, and it's just it's a lighter, it's a Bic lighter in a windstorm, like smoke. You do it anyway because it's the right thing to do, but it's a lonely little trying to sit. Yeah, skepticism, difficult thing to, very easy, cynical, and to pretend that cynicism is being clever. And like, the other thing about all this is, I don't want to get too far out over my skis because obviously I'm not a biologist, but like, we're in like fifth, sixth grade, and you get taught about Gregor Mendel and the pea plants, and like, oh, if you have a dominant gene and a recessive gene, and you have two recessive genes, it might express 25% chance. Uh, and that's like presented to you as genetics, right? And for most of us, we don't really get into the depths of genetics and how complicated expression. But it turns out that like the little four quadrant Mendel squares, Punnett square, Mendel square. Exactly. You see why I don't do this well. Is so overly simplistic. Like, it turned out that like genetics is hugely complicated. So it's not like four quadrants. It's like hundreds of quadrants for a single expression of a gene. And then you like, sex is not nearly as easy to determine as what chromosome you have, and like gender and sex can exist in the mind as well as society. It's like this thing is all massively complicated, and we sit here and we pretend that it's absolutist, which doesn't seem to make sense. But like I'm not a math guy. I was never good at math. I'm told that I wasn't not good at math, that I was just taught it poorly, which is probably true. But even I can sit and think about the concept of multiple of these massive sets of huge squares of expression and go, wow, that's probably more complicated than I can simply say by just looking at it and observing it.
I mean, anyone with any modicum of intelligence would come to that sort of conclusion, right?
Yeah, I mean, but like, the other half of it is, and I get it, like, because I can kind of see the arguments of abolition where they go, gender is silly. And I get it, but I'm really attached to the concept of being. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just, because it's not like I fit the traditional definition, like, about like, et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
Gender has a very powerful hold on us.
yeah, it does.
Like, as a society, and like,
This is really annoying. I don't know what the hell. I'm so sorry. I'm dealing with technical issues
our tech,
on my computer.
like, we have this very powerful attachment to these things, even if they don't necessarily make sense. And I can see why people get angry, but I don't see that as justification for the cruelty that I see on a daily basis to people.
No, it isn't.
Um, or LGBTQ people in general. We are social, very much. it's very much a way we identify it. 820. And losing that concept that is scary. But societies change all the time. Like society is never. I'm going to bring up the sheet again. It's the 5 C's of history. Number 1, change over time. Big deal. We like it here. And things are complex. Societies change, and how we observe, like the things that people think are traditional values. Things we think are traditional values are maybe 100, 200 years old. Not a lot of tradition when you get down to it. The vast panoply of the thousands of years.
Still trying to convince Ukrainians that the nation state is a recent thing, that ethno-nationalism didn't exist during Kozak times.
Well, but it's not that simple, right? The political concept of the nation state is a reason.
Yeah.
But communities of nations and countries and peoples are ancient.
Of course,
concepts.
yeah, that's an older concept. But if you would go to a Ukrainian village in the 17th century and ask, what is a Ukrainian? They're not going to be able to tell you that answer. They're not going to be able to say themselves.
Right.
That's for sure.
But they have a sense of themselves as a unified people and a connection to.
They have a sense of local identity and a sense of religious identity, of confessional identity. And that's sort of the main identity that they have. Their town or village.
Yeah, they have a
they
sense.
Often use the, they often use the word
sense of communal identity.
Yeah, they often use the word tutashi, which means like literally we're from here or we're here. Yeah. The same thing goes for Poland too, actually. Like me and my friend Wojciech were talking about that, how you go back to the early 19th century or 18th century in Poland, and you say to a peasant in a given town, what is a Pole? And actually what they would say is like, oh, those are those aristocrats, because that's
right. Well,
essentially,
there's a very strong connection of the Polish with the Commonwealth, sort of democratic project.
Yes. Which reminds me, we haven't had old Wojciech on our show yet, even though he was going to do it. Yeah, I gotta.
Yeah. Who's that on? Huh?
That's on me. It's on me.
You.
Yeah.
We got stuff to do. We gotta eventually nail down this schedule thing. It's been a year, almost 2 years now, a year and a half.
Yeah, I mean, now there's some of the people that I want to have on actually have much more regimented schedule, minus having a kid. I'm talking about my colleague John Distatska.
Which reminds me, the offspring of that Twitter thing, Michael Karl. His genocide studies, though.
Oh, he does?
Yes, that was the guy I tagged you on Twitter.
Yeah, I saw that earlier. I am just now back on my Twitter, and holy shit, I'm watching. Okay, I know Visegrad 24 has its issues, but I'm watching they just posted a warm-up exercise of Iran launching they're filling this whole sky with MLRS rockets, and then just like a whole, it's a propaganda video, but I'm just like astounded.
Yeah, Brooks, we're not gonna be able to not get away with not having you. You're far too popular. Didn't the East Roman Empire Byzantine call their domain? They thought of themselves as Roman. Calling them the Byzantine Empire. So this is. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. After the Western Roman Empire collapses, the Eastern Roman Empire continues on. And they consider themselves still Roman because, as far as they're concerned, they're Romans. all these petty kingdoms start rising up, and they eventually consolidate under Charlemagne, who forms the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire isn't Roman in any real sense, obviously, but the calling it that is designed to invoke this continuity between the Western Roman Empire and this new kind of king of Charlemagne. The Eastern Roman Empire, though, still considers themselves Rome, but Western historians of the time want to distance that association, so they start calling it the Byzantine Empire. Try to legitimize more accurately Holy Roman. Like, these are complicated little political maneuverings that happen throughout history. It's why historiography is so important. Why the change over time concept is important. We kind of understand how we got our understanding of the past, because it's influence. Like, I had a history professor when I was an undergrad who very like, you shouldn't influence people's understanding of the past. And I was really confused by this, because it feels like that quantum mechanics thing, right? Where you influence things by observing them, how you interpret them. I don't know how to do history without influencing.
I would agree with you on that.
I don't know how to do that. And it was a really weird discussion. This guy was kind of weird on a couple other levels. I took that class with my girlfriend at the time. You know who I'm referring to, Hetman.
Yeah, I do.
And she to this day makes fun of him for his pronunciation of the words when we talk.
Can you give an example?
Carnegie. Like, he's getting close to doing a slur to say Andrew Carnegie.
Carnegie.
Yeah. Carnegie. Like, what? Huh?
There was forget if he taught international business at my undergrad university, something, but he called Steve Jobs Steve Jobs.
Like the Bible book?
Like Jobs, yeah.
Job, the book. Job.
Like Job, the book, like the book of Job, yeah.
Oh, I was doing late night watching it. I don't watch anything serious. Was that professor Greek? No, he was German. Or at least his last name was German. I had no this was a survey class, right? An American history survey class. It was like 400 students in a lecture. The only one I really had much contact with was the teacher. Outside of that, and like, he was the most history TA you ever had. Like, black scarf, black coat type thing. Like, this guy has marbles and a soft pack in his pocket, doesn't he? Anyway, I was watching a YouTube channel got popped up in recommendeds, and if you've spent much time with me at all, you know I have a beloved. I love religion and syncretism and whatnot. And he's like, oh, here's an explanation of Christian demonology. So I started watching the thing, because that's exactly the thing you want to watch before you go to bed, right? That won't give you nightmares at all. I started watching the thing, and it was not much I had read about before. A couple interesting things, a couple interesting stories, and it was actually pretty well done. Not well cited, but well done. Spent a lot of time citing the Bible and some of the books, the non-canonical books of the Bible, to kind of construct this story and talk about the Nephilim, the various
Nephilim.
The Nephilim. I heard it pronounced Nephilim.
Yeah.
I was in Canada. And
they taught you about that in catechism?
Well, what happened in my particular case,
actually, I've been to many Catholic sermons, and I never heard anything about the Nephilim.
Here's the problem that happened when I was in catechism. I was still that precocious little kid who read his entire way through the Bible, and I found the passage invokes the Nephilim as giants. So I asked questions.
There were giants in those days, right?
Yes, there were giants in those days. So I asked questions, and ultimately I asked enough questions that I became an atheist.
I was just gonna say, I remember going with you, by the way, to do volunteer work at your parish.
Well, I did that kind of stuff too. Like I still do some volunteer work from time to time, not as much anymore.
Yeah.
And okay, so, yeah. The other thing I did the other day is I love those kind of ghost story type channels, bedtime stories and wartime. They did the Nephilim of the mountains of Afghanistan, or the giant in Afghanistan story this last week. Interesting.
I actually want to watch that one. I've been doing a lot of watching on like I've been doing a lot of I don't know, do you follow like Let's Talk Religion and all of those pretty big name channels? I've just been really fascinated with Gnosticism and various, like, you know,
those guys are nuts.
Of course, but just like
oh no, I was the only one in class Titan who read the Bible. That was it. I was the only one who actually read it. I read it cover to cover. Guess what? The Bible makes no sense whatsoever. None. At all. They're like, yes, Jesus is the fulfillment of prophecy. He's of these prophecies. No, he's not. That's not what those prophecies say. Don't do this to the English language.
What's really interesting, though, that I learned recently is that the Godhead is not a uniquely Christian concept. It's actually a Jewish concept. It exists beforehand. And it's actually something that they avoid, like the plague, that discussion, the various passages of the Torah that mention two emanations of God, one as Son of Man. Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard of that. It's the two powers in heaven concept. There was a recent, like, a book written, I think in the 1970s by a scholar of Judaism on it. But yeah, I had no idea that was a Jewish concept.
Well, there are a lot of overlapping. Obviously,
there's a lot of, like, you know, it would have been very, I think it would have been very terrifying, but it would have been very interesting to go back in time to say, like, the Second Temple era Roman sort of Judean era, like before
Roman.
There was a concept of rabbinic Judaism.
Roman.
So many, just, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because there was just so many different concepts of Judaism. Like, you know, the Essenes are a very interesting group.
Well, you got to figure, ultimately, when you talk about Judaism, that, like, heavily filtered now through our modern experience. But think about this region, just generally, the Canaanite area, right? How many cultures that we know come out of that? Like, just that language. The Carthaginians are Semitic people.
Yeah, the Phoenicians.
The Phoenicians. Yeah, the godhead of Hinduism is definitely, and Zoroastrianism is definitely part of that too, that particular theory. But, like, think about all these cultures, like, and like the combinations, and, like, how much is lost. Like, if you
that's why I get miffed when I see, like, a lot of the modern, or not even modern, I hate using the word modern Orthodox Jews, because those are that's the group of Orthodox Jews that exists today that believe that you can use a cell phone, like a smartphone, you know, but still practice, like, Judaism. But my issue with them, with Orthodoxy in general, they claim to be a authentic movement that's roots go back all the way to the beginning of Judaism, and that's just not the case at all. They are an offshoot that survived. They're an offshoot of the Pharisees group, and I'm not actually mentioning that with any negative connotation, by the way, but they're an offshoot of that strain. There was a much, much larger, including early Christendom, by the way. They were early Christendom was considered to be a part of that whole,
Yeah.
and that changed over time. And actually, there was no, up until, I think, would it be the Council of Nicaea that, any sort of agreed, you know, idea among early Christians that about Jesus's divinity?
Yes, that was the Council of Nicaea. There was
Yeah.
a wide. Well, there's still like something like in the order of 45,000 Christian sects with various ideas about Jesus.
No, that's true. That's true. But I mean, when you go further back, the further back you go, the more variance you see, the larger variety that you see of these different groups. And the same goes for Judaism too. As you might have known, my ex-girlfriend, who was Iranian, was part of a very small, they're the remaining Gnostic ethno-religious group that exists. They're the only group,
Right.
They're the Mandaean group. And, I'm like reading a lot of their, holy texts, and I'm thinking, I'm like, it's a real big shame that they don't accept converts at all. Because it provides a much, much better explanation as to why bad things happen to good people, why evil exists in the world, because the world itself is inherently flawed. And that's what I always found kind of a little bit more appealing about Gnosticism as an idea. It kind of addresses that issue in a much better way, in a much more salient and clear way than
the traditional problem of evil that arises for Christians, generally.
They don't have a good position on it.
Well,
They
no one has a
try.
good answer. Like
No one does, but I think that the God of this world being a cosmic asshole makes a lot more sense than yeah, like God is all loving, yet all these bad things happen.
he's kind of a dick. God of the Old Testament's very much a dick.
If you go back far enough, the roots of the God of the Old Testament is that he's a raider storm god. Yahweh is a raider storm god.
Yes.
And you have passages within it that are reference that fact. I forget the actual verse, but it's basically it goes, I'm paraphrasing, but you set thy pillars of thy temple on the waters. You maketh the cloud. You maketh the clouds your chariot. You ride the wings of the wind. And it's referring to Yahweh's role as a storm god or leader of heavenly armies of storms. Is
that one of the Psalms?
Yeah, that's a psalm. That's a psalm, actually. I don't know which one.
I don't remember the exact.
I love the Psalms, by the way. I find them to be very astounding that such beauty was written so long ago. And I feel like if you don't understand, I feel like it's hard as a Christian to really grasp a lot of the Psalms and a lot of the very
the problem with Christianity,
Jewish nature of the Old Testament without being a part of that community.
The problem,
it doesn't even really resonate with how can it resonate with a Christian in Switzerland, for example, the
Well,
same way it would with you know,
the
someone who.
principal problem of growing up Catholic. So like Mass has, I did lecturing for a while after I aged out of altar service. But Mass has the first reading, which comes out of the Old Testament, and then the second reading, which comes out of Testament Gospels. You don't get a lot of exposure as a Christian, I think, to the Old Testament as a coherent book because they use the Old Testament to justify the New.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So what happens is all of the nuance of reading the Old Testament properly gets lost for a lot of Christians. And
I remember I was really interested in the passage of Ecclesiastes, and you know, no no pastor or priest that I could bring it up to would have a good explanation, but I ended up going to a friend of mine's Orthodox style wedding, and I asked the rabbi who was leading it about that passage, which is funny because when you bring up something like if you mention Ecclesiastes, a person like that's not going to know what he's going to ask. What the hell are you talking about? You actually have to know the Hebrew name of that group of books
yeah,
for them to know it because they don't know the translations.
the
But he knew. I was able to find it, and his interpretation of it was so much more educated and nuanced than I would have gotten from a like say a Protestant pastor of the likes like one of my mom's churches or like certainly a Catholic priest.
well, Ecclesiastes always stuck out on my mind because that's where the quote comes. Mom's head. Uh,
Your
Ecclesiastes.
mom has Ecclesiastes on her headstone?
For everything, there's a season.
Oh,
Yes.
that one. Okay, that passage. Because I'm thinking of the part of Ecclesiastes that I'm thinking of is the passage where it says vanity, all is vanity, and it's basically talking about how you have to cherish your youth because there'll be a time when your body starts to fail you and that it's actually a very dark passage. Like shit, I forget the passage, the exact one, but it's basically, and it was written, they could tell it was, its origins are kind of at a point where there's sort of this transition going, but where the afterlife in that part, like of the concept of it is shell. So like the sort of the Jewish underworld where where it's more or less oblivion but worse because you're basically in a dark corner eating clay. Um, Ecclesiastes 1.
While he's looking that up, we are going to open up call-ins. If you'd like, hop in the Discord and hop in the green, and I will drag you in if you wish to call in about anything we've talked about tonight.
Oh yeah, so it's meaningless. Meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And then that's the start of this. Yeah, it's so um so dark.
Well, yeah, that's you got to figure at least part of this. Most religious texts have this kind of admonishment. Value things while you have them. Yeah, Cal, you're totally afraid to talk to me. It's not like you weren't doing it 2 nights. And like that resonates for me in a certain way, particularly when you consider like how young I was when I was diagnosed with a thing that was going to, kill my kidneys. I don't know if it's not intentional. leftist audio at its best. Part of the problem, I think, is part of the problem with the readings that we get of that is, for Christians anyway, is that Christians are looking to the Bible to justify the concept of Jesus Christ as the Messiah. So
I'm gonna take actually like another shot at this, but I have a friend who's he grew up in a very sort of not traditionalist, but like he grew up with some like his mom was pretty crazy into religion, and he had a very hard like a very problematic relationship with Christianity growing up, and obviously he becomes an atheist. So one verse that he decided to pick on to try to destroy Christianity was this psalm. What's the number? But it's basically by the rivers of Babylon psalm,
okay,
which ends with talking about Babylon and how the infants of Babylon should have their heads. This is like an expression of anger, of course, a very Bronze Age, or not actually Bronze Age,
that'd be
actually it'd be Iron
Age at that
yeah,
point.
Iron Age, and an Iron Age expression of violence about how maybe infants of Babylon have their heads. I don't want to get demonetized, but
Yeah, in Minecraft.
My friend was using this to justify an attack on Christianity, and I'm thinking, you're doing this, and then you're just like, oh, so Christianity advocates the violence towards infants, and no, it doesn't. This is a passage written. He's not absolutely not understanding the historical past, like the context in which the passage was written. And I feel like that a lot of uninformed atheists who haven't done their real research nitpick and choose parts of the Bible that are particularly violent.
There is a problem, I think. There are two halves to that discussion. The first is that there are Christians today who are violent, want to subject people to oppression, and use the Bible
Without a
to
doubt,
justify
yeah.
it. I think the wrong avenue of attack is to say the Bible is the problem. In that case, the Bible is you go back to the Enlightenment, where we say, yes, we can analyze the Bible as a work of literature. We can. That's what we're supposed to do.
Yes, absolutely.
You need to address those people as what they are. What they are is authoritarians. And you need to call them out as that. The fact is, like we did this here in the United States after 9/11. We're like, oh, they're bad. Well, there are some Muslims that use Islam to oppress other people. That's a bad thing to do. They're authoritarians. But there are billions who live in peace every day, who go about their business, just want to live. People get mad at Jews. Sometimes there are Jews who use Judaism to oppress others. They're authoritarians. His name is Benjamin Netanyahu. But there are Jews who don't do this. We have to recognize those things. It's easy, especially if you're coming out of religion. And so many people are coming out of religion to be. I was angry for a time too.
Of course, and that was my friend too. I mean, a lot of it was coming from his place of anger, but when I see such a blatant misunderstanding of the historical context, I look at it as a teachable moment.
All right, we are bringing in Dia. Hello.
Hello. We cannot hear them.
You are muted. Hello.
Sorry about that. I've got my name set up in here incorrect. It should be Lilia. My apologies.
No worries, Lilia. How are you
having.
tonight?
I'm well today. For me, over here in Australia, I'm doing pretty okay. How about
Okay.
yourselves?
How are you today? Sorry.
I
That was
knew
very
I picked
American
up
of
that
us.
accent.
We're doing good.
We're
Oh,
fine.
glad to hear it. Glad to hear you both in good spirits. It's pretty hard to do at the moment with everything going on in politics in the US. I actually was calling in because I discovered you guys through Mr. Sunday as the mutual. So props to him for the recommendation. I've been listening to some of your streams since and like the way you think things through. I am someone with a background in politics and philosophy, and as an Australian, one of the things that was really drilled into me very hard by a lecturer of mine was that when it comes to Australian politics, the only thing that truly matters is what's happening at the heart of the US empire. As a result of that, I've historically since kept a really as close an eye as I can on US politics, its currents and where it's going and things like that. And I wanted to kind of pick your respective brains about the prognosis for America in the next decade. The specific things I'm curious about getting your perspectives on are it's a very fair thing to say at the moment that the United States is in a very, very dangerous juncture point. The democratic foundations are very vestigial at the moment. The primacy of judiciary authority and newly enshrined legal interpretations that again reinforce private multinational corporation power, as well as the unitary theory of the presidency. All of these things are in ascent over and against legislative, congressional, and democratic power. Now, with those things coming at a more judicial, legal, structural angle, what is it going to take? You know, if you had a game plan, as it were, to bring the US back from the brink of tipping into a kind of imperial executive system, what needs to happen in the
So,
next 10 years for that to become a possibility?
this
As in to
is,
pull back from the brink.
yeah, I think this is a difficult question. The first thing, like you notice, the biggest problem, I think, in your unchecked power, which isn't something that happens in other countries. Most other countries have like
No.
term limits on justices, fairly
Mm-hmm.
significant
Mm-hmm.
limits to their power of
Mm.
interpretation. A fundamental flaw for the United States was when it doesn't really have a defined role. Like you have the case of Marbury versus where they give themselves the ability to um and this in and of itself isn't a bad thing because there is a chance that both Congress and the executive uh, overstep their authority, and it happened in early United States, right? Things like the Alien and Sedition Acts. The problem has been for us for a very long time, since the 70s. So, like, we are spinning, our wheels have been spinning on this problem for a while. We have had an increasingly authoritarian bent for one of our political and an unwillingness by the other party to address that.
Mm-hmm.
So the Republican Party kind of reacts to the 60s in a very dramatic way. Conservative institutions hold to. The religious right becomes powerful. And its dominionist idea, supplanting government, such as. So how we do that, I have probably a very aggressive answer, and Edmund might have a different one. is we start to address these things. We start to address these right-wing groups. We start to say no more federalist society. You don't get to do things anymore. You're trying to subvert the system. And then we completely restructure the Supreme Court. We expand it. We put term limits on it by constitutional amendment if necessary. And we limit their ability. And we throw out a lot of these. We throw out this presidential immunity to say no. Like, what are you going to do? How do you plan to enforce that? No, I'm not going to do it. Like, it's going to take an adherence to a principle over the letter of the law, the principle enshrined in that we set up for the law. And it's going to be unpopular. The person who does it's probably going to get beat to crap in the media.
I mean, I would agree with you.
Like,
yeah, I don't have any disagreements with that.
I think one of those things that marks me out is different from leftists. I am perfectly okay with the society defending it. And I think the Supreme Court has become a bad actor. I think the populist movement that Trump is representative of, because he didn't call it, just kind of grasped on to say that these things aren't okay and that we're not going to tolerate them. I tweeted today in regards to the situation in England, that these people are terrorists. They're not protesters, because we don't call right-wingers terrorists. But that's what's happening. They're burning down libraries. They tried to burn down a church with Muslims inside of it. How do you do that? Is you kind of embrace the concept of the reset button. I like Australia. That particular time when when the last queen, Charles, Elizabeth, dissolved your parliament because they were getting rowdy. There is, I think, an immense advantage to that system, that it has that it has a certain resiliency, that it resets itself so that we don't have here, because we don't have sovereignty embedded in a person. We have it embedded in the concept of the.
To make matters worse, too, there's a authoritarian bent within the American public, and that's actually that's the main problem.
Yeah. There's a particular
that's the main problem.
There's a particular bent, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier, about people who are in the places that are left behind, what you sometimes hear referred to as flyover country. Is those people want to see, not so much, they want to see authoritarianism, but it's an expression of anger and not necessarily of what they really want, because they talk about freedom, but they want the people who they think ignore them to be punished.
I mean, at this point, that's a conversation I would absolutely love to run with you on, because I have a lot of thoughts about that personally. However, I do just want to potentially cut back to the question that we sort of started with before going and leaping off on that tangent, because I think, like you've expressed, the issue of authoritarian desire within the US body politic is an extremely dire and serious one. But taking, I guess, back to a more of a top-down kind of angle on things, because and this is, I guess, where I would like to invite you both to correct me, as whilst I'm an observer of US politics, I certainly am by no means an expert. I don't have any degrees in the subject or anything like that. But it would seem to me that in order to bring the US back from the brink of a full imperial semi-dictatorial state under the president and the judiciary, there has to be almost a decade, if not more, of democratic presidencies, plural, consistent, if not ongoing control over the Senate at the very, very least, if not Senate and Congress, just in order to be able to have the combined control over the respective levers of power between executive orders, keeping control over the Department of Justice and the State Department, in order to actually break down some of the authoritarian personalities and groups that have wedged themselves into the infrastructure of government, especially in the judiciary. You know, I can't imagine that reforming the judiciary at a constitutional level is going to be anything other than a very difficult, arduous, long reform campaign that will require momentum gathered over successive administrations if it is to be more than just a band-aid solution. So, you know, packing the court is a short-term fix, but it ultimately doesn't change the fact that the court just basically gave itself power to overrule any public institution when it comes to disputes raised by private corporations. You have packing the court, but that power is still being accrued to the court. So you've got to find some way to actually take that precedent that has been set this year and turn it over. You also just have to hold on to the presidency for, you know, the foreseeable future until you can find some way of more than just a band-aid fix to have the Trump versus the United States precedent overturned, and then new barriers put up around the presidency that can't just be removed willy-nilly because a group of originalists decided to, you know, get together, pack the courts in their own way, and exercise judicial authority in an ultimate, you know, moment of irony of, you know, the most radical interpretation of the Constitution an originalist has ever put together, i.e. the president is above the law.
Sure.
You have to hold on to the presidency, because if a Republican gets in, they're not going to, like, they're definitively not going to respect the power of the seat. They're going to exploit the power of the seat to accrue as much executive authority as is possible with the blessing of the court. You, at the best case scenario at the moment, seems like if you can get a Democrat to hold and seat warm and not abuse the shit out of the powers that have basically been granted until something can be found.
Well, I think
that like that, yeah.
I think one of the initial yes, for the moment the Republicans are not trusted with. That doesn't mean that it's always going to be so. We have political systems ebb and flow in this country. I think you're looking at I think depends on what happens in November, but I think you're kind of looking at the end of viability version of the.
What do you expect will come after it, though? A return to the neocon norm?
I
Like
don't
norm of the
know.
Republic?
I don't know. It really depends on. It depends on how badly Trump loses. The other half of it is like we have to sit and address those things. Yes, for sure. The Chevron ruling is devastating. However, I don't know how immediate the problem for the it's a problem, it's an issue, but a lot of those agencies are going to continue to try to pull off what they were doing before for as long as possible. They have to have each individual battle now, and that's going to take money and resources away from other things that Republicans want to do. The ultimate thing about the court is, yes, I think Biden is suggestions, which if you didn't, I think that 3 months are long that he gave, and we a bindable code of conduct. The first way I would restructure the court specifically is to expand the number of justices, something on the order of 25. And then when you get a case before the court, you don't know which justices are going to take the case. So it's hard to lobby them. A random selection of like 5 justices at once take the case and listen to it. This does 2 things. You have 25 justices. You can massively expand what the Supreme Court can do as they get on a level, and it's much harder to get the justice you want for a specific ruling. The institutional system is going to have to be presidents and Congress who are willing to hold the Supreme Court accountable. Dick Durbin has been bad about that. He's a senator from Illinois, senior senator from Illinois, excuse me, who is on the Judiciary Committee. He's been bad about
I
it.
think it would help if Congress and the Senate had term limits too.
That's a different discussion, which I disagree. But yes, that would be where I would start, is reforming institutionally this to have this larger battery. I don't know, like the political realities of that are kind of difficult. Because you can't necessarily guarantee that the Democrat's not going to be a jackass too.
You certainly can't guarantee it at all. I mean, this is in part what makes the present moment so terrifying, frankly, which is that it's only going to take one bad actor.
Yeah, but like, for what I will say to kind of assuage fear, the Supreme Court has been wrong in the past, and the presidency has been occupied by real son of a bitch. And we've gotten through it. It's difficult now. It looks dangerous now. I don't know if it's necessarily more dangerous than it's dangerous for certain groups, for sure.
I would contest that. I would say it's probably more dangerous now than it's been. I mean, for instance, we've got Trump's, revelations that he got the $10 million from LCC, and then used the Justice Department to squash Mueller's inquiries into that aspect of his campaign financing. Now, this is the sort of stuff that I think is pretty well understood since Nixon, that US presidents get away with. They just can. But what the precedent of Trump versus America sets, it's shit like Iran-Contra is that's just business as usual now, baby.
Yeah, obviously.
Like, Iran-Contra is fine. There's no impeachment for that. There's no crime that can be prosecuted. Reagan was right.
Well, yeah, that's certainly a thing. Yes, that's a problem. But I don't know if that's gonna catch the way they want it. I have a very sneaky, especially Harris win, that they're going to tell them the Supreme Court to get stuffed on that. It's not. I mean,
you would hope so. You would hope so. But all it takes is one person to turn around and go, I kind of like this. I kind of like that I can have my official decisions organized and structured, pre-planned in such a way as to avoid prosecution. I think what the precedent creates is not like the Trump crimes are the Trump crimes, but there's a sociologist who did a lot on media stuff. Like, his name isn't coming to my mind right this second, but he made a point in the context of politics, media, and the sociology of it, where he turned around and he said, strategy follows structure. And when I see that decision that came out, all I can think of is the sorts of people that Cheney and Bush had around them, and go, how would these types of real bastards strategically plan around this decision to their own ends?
Well, and
Paul Wolfowitz and things like that.
Yeah, I get
people
what you're
like
saying,
that.
and I get who you're talking about. I would note that those are some of the same bastards who didn't seem to care much. I'm thinking very particularly of what's his ambassador puts the ass in ambassador. Worst ambassador wants to bomb Iran. All damn it, it's on the tip of my tongue. But like, they don't.
You know what he was ambassador to? Which country he was ambassador to?
I forget. That's where they all end up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not Manafort. Manafort was another. Did a book recently. Damn it. Obviously, it's. But yeah, I can understand the concern. I think for the moment Biden has positioned himself properly. That he's rejected.
Okay.
That he's rejected this situation. Hope that answers your question. I don't want to cut you off, but I want to thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
sure,
very
no
much.
problems, not at all. Sometime we can perhaps next talk about the issue of fascism within the body politic. I'd love to pick your brains on that as well.
Absolutely. Have a good night.
Lovely to talk. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Oh my!
Hi, Brooks. How are
my.
you?
How are you folks doing?
Want to
Doing
yell at
well.
me?
Oh, I Lily left. That's a shame. That's a shame. I was hoping to talk with Lily, not you two, but I'll deal with it. How are things?
I'm good. How are you?
It's good. I want to ask I was actually really curious to sort of have another take on Lily's question. Has America ever not been on the brink of self-destruction in this way? It's a real question.
Okay.
Good question.
Like name a decade where we weren't literally finding new revelations about how awful everything was, or how we were on the verge of collapse or destruction in one way or another by fascist or whatever internally.
I mean, I think it's been more pronounced, though. Yeah,
I think there are times when it's worse than others. Like I would say, the 1850s is worse than the preceding decade, and it was like, and there were times in the 20s, for example, in the 30s particularly, where it was worse than others. You had like the business plot in the 30s.
The business plot, yeah, is one that I would mention, but like,
or the destruction of the balance of power between the slave states.
But again,
and
the business plot, sure, but the business plot is like, and it involves even the same fucking people genetically as the Brooks Brothers riot, which ended up kind of doing the same fucking thing, right?
I don't want to make a meta statement on society, but I also think there's a degree to which most societies are sitting just on that knife's edge at any.
Really? I would argue that maybe they aren't. It's a question I've actually started asking like history nerd friends of mine, and also wondering myself as I dive back through. I've been rereading. That's the third time I reread Autumn of the Black Snake, which I always recommend because it's like the birth of America as sort of this naturally corrupt, horrifying nightmare. But have we ever not had this be the case? It's a real question. Like, if we want to go back, we can talk about, aside from Reagan, aside from Bush Sr., aside from Bush Jr., aside from Obama drone striking and killing Americans without trial, like that shit. Go back 100 fucking years. Talk about, Roosevelt. As much as I love Roosevelt, he did a bunch of shit he fucking really, really sort of didn't have the power for. And it was fine, I guess. Like, is there ever a time where we weren't horrifically close? As a real question. Like, is another way to phrase it. Isn't the nature of society, how we consider it and how we look at it through this lens of we're either heading towards or away from catastrophe, we will always find ourselves or justify a way for us to look at that we are heading towards catastrophe. But the reality is, of any hyper complex system, it's always easy to see, however you want to, catastrophe coming. So aren't we more creating the nature of the system being this catastrophe and being this constant panic and this sort of this worry and everything when, yeah, it's kind of same shit we've always done.
Maybe that's a lot of history. That's a lot of like.
No, but it's like literally from the beginning, George Washington formed the army to wipe out native peoples so he can get the land to make money off of and pay back those who financed the Revolutionary War. That's horrifying. Like, but that's literally, that's how it started. That's what we did. And it's like, that's our thing. We decide not to help Haiti, so that way France will have to expend resources. And that'll give us, you know, ultimately Louisiana and Louisiana Purchase for the slave trade. Like we do, we're always on the edge of awful shit.
I brought Leah back.
Hey, Lily.
Hey, Brooks. I think you have a really, really good counterpoint to the sorts of issues I was prognosticating on. I mean, you know, it would be very, I think, easy to turn around and say, oh, you know, world's largest military machine ever in the hands of Christian theocrats. But, you know, that's to also completely overlook, for instance, how close we've come to mutually assured nuclear annihilation between the US and Russia post-World War II.
And even on that, like, not that I'm saying like take the nice happy view. I if you've ever heard me talk, you know, I have a generally cynical view of things, and I am worried about the future of things. But like, for example, just on that, the theocratic concept. Sure, we can have theocrats in the White House, and we've had them there before, actually, many times.
Also, astrologists.
Yeah, well, and we've had theocrats in extreme ways who were able to sort of co-opt and manufacture wars even. But underneath it, like, these things either don't last or don't have the power because of the really weird way that our society is sort of structured and the way that sort of naturally things sort of have a rumble to them that sort of interrupts and causes discursive shifts inside of things. You know, the military is actually, I think, a really interesting example because fucking 10 years, I have a military family, and I can tell you 15 years ago when my uncle was still in, and the people around him, they were true believers in the whole idea of Christianity versus Islam. And like, they were, you know, generals and shit like that. But like, it's not really the case anymore. And it's only been like a decade, and that's kind of wild. That is like, that there's this level of sea change versus that, and it's like,
but there's
so when we
always been an undercurrent of ephemeralness. Like these things,
but exactly my point.
These things don't last. Like we talk about the political party system, political science, and American political history. There's serious debate about whether we are entering into kind of phase of American politics, and like. It happens.
How?
Well,
like, my question would be like,
it's entirely arbitrarily decided. I mean, when one.
No, but I mean, like, isn't more my point? Isn't the modus operandi of shit like, we'll figure it out, and it's going to be bad for a bit, and then maybe a bit better, and then it'll figure. Like, are we actually on the edge of crises? Because one of the things. I bring it up because one of my big frustrations with the general political system, we'll just say at fucking large, and it's significant, is that people don't get involved. And people don't get involved because they feel hopeless. They feel like there's big people doing big things and that they can't make a difference. They feel that there's an inevitability or momentum or all these things. And because this is how we tell narrative stories, like, we talk about this Trump election as though it's like the culmination of so many events because we like to tell stories that way. It's really not. It's a hyper contingent mishmash of shit that we've decided to tell this sort of one thread through. And so if it's the case that things aren't actually constantly falling apart, then it puts people in a position to go, oh, wait, if things aren't about to literally, we're going to have genocide en masse next week, well, I can actually take a chance. Maybe I won't be the best politician, but I can try. Because I think part of the crisis thing, and there's people who've written on this, the nature of crisis capitalism, the nature of crisis politics, is people who care won't put their foot into the ring. They won't take a chance because it matters that much. And it's part of why people like Biden or Obama or Clinton's or Trump, really, or any of these people use these kinds of terms that everything is about to happen. I have to be the one. I'm so important and so smart, and I'm so clever that I was able to figure this out, but you are not. But I will protect you, because otherwise, good Lord, imagine if you tried this. You're not nearly as good as I am. And that kind of space that's created feels, this narrative, as I'm describing it, feels so accurate to the last 40 years of what politics I've been able to see, let alone the last 5 to 10, that I'm really curious if we're actually as close. You bring up Chevron, for example. I think Chevron is like end of America type shit. I do. It's a horrifying thing to put an end to bureaucratic state. But since that decision, we've seen 6 lawsuits about it. And it's like, oh, weird. And they're like really esoteric ones. If you haven't like Google sued because fucking the Copyright Bureau overstepped its bounds in this other way. And I'm like, this isn't what I thought would like, is it, what the fuck? Basically,
those could be without further details behind it. Those could just be test water cases before sinking into meatier stuff. But I do want to come back nonetheless, Brooks, to a point you make about the narratives about crisis and the heroic politician, because I do agree with you, and I think it's a really, really good way to trouble how to think about the moment. I really, really like that you do that in that way. Perhaps then I could rephrase somewhat some of the concerns I was articulating earlier, not in a framework of crisis, but in terms of a framework of opportunities and strategies. And that I would say, to recast my earlier points, I think this year has seen the Republican conservative movement achieve a string of opportunities that give them potentially a lot of leverage into the future to entrench a lot of things that they've wanted to see happen in the US. I
get that. And I would still say, because I totally get what you're saying. You're talking about they're really doing their best to bring like Project 25, whatever, stupid bullshit. Like get this shit locked, you can get things locked in that can't be changed, right?
Or that are difficult to change. But I guess the point that I would then move from that is to not then say, oh, of us, we're all doomed, but rather to turn around and start thinking through, okay, if these are some of the important leverage points that are going to be used to reduce people's capacity or rights to body autonomy, freedom, legal representation, democratic participation, etc., it then moves to the question of what strategies to be employed and extended to push back against this, and not just at the level of electoralism, not just at the level of
that's the rub.
Heroic politics.
Because that would be what I would say to you is that there is no strategy. Like, this is the rub. This is how this shit works, and I think is incredibly insidious. Because if we are on the edge, even if it's possible, then it's we need to really consider and think through what would be the smart move to do, because if we make the wrong move, and the answer is, and I say this, I've got friends in politics in multiple countries. The ones that are the most successful, the countries that are most successful, are ones where people are just trying shit. And
Yeah,
like
I would say
that thing is fascinating when you
the
consider it.
idea, I think, is not less that people's very difficult to actually. The idea is to get people to think that they do not have options. That is the bigger problem for things like this. Everyone, many people think that they don't have the option. I think what I would love to see, patient-wise, for American politics, is this sense of doing things. The kind of like perversity thesis idea of, well, if you do things, then things will get worse. That's the thing you got to push back against. Anything is do things.
Oh, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that. Absolutely. I don't
Australia
necessarily.
is a great example, by the way. Like, very particularly, Australia has one of my favorite examples of like shit that before it happened couldn't have been done. And in every country that hasn't done it, they go, no, it's just not possible. And that's getting rid of guns. It's a fucking crazy thing that some fucking person in Australia, I mean, I know the story. I'm just trying to make it less about that dude. Like, someone went, well, that sucked. Let's get rid of guns, because it seemed like a good idea. And they fucking did it. And
it's hands down, as someone who grew up during that period and who was avowedly, I despise the person in question, that former prime minister. It is hands down one of the best. It is not one of. It is the single best thing he ever did for Australia.
It's an extraordinary story because he's a huge piece of shit otherwise. But again, when you talk about like, I'm going to just do a thing, or I'm going to figure it out and I'm just going to make it move, when you start having this conversation of like, when you do away with the idea of what's the right strategy, how can we think through this, what is the way for us to do it, and instead say, like, just go try to get laws made, you end up in a much better position. Otherwise, you end up, as I'm seeing it, where you basically have fascists who absolutely don't care and are willing to do anything to, like, they know they're willing to do crazy shit, like really fucking wild crazy shit, because they don't give a fuck. They just want to get back into power and keep doing crazy shit. But then you have like the liberal / left / opposition parties, or the reasonable ones, whatever you want to call them, of the Republicans. And what they do is they go, oh, well, we don't want it to get first. We don't want to get further. We need to be very careful here because we might be on the precipice of Nazi Germany or some shit like that. And so everyone's like, dancing and being careful and walking on eggshells instead of just trying shit. And that one sec. That kind of mentality, I think, puts everyone in a position of, okay, cool, let's get behind someone who knows better than me, which we love and which the fascists love. And so it works in their favor, and it continues to. This is everything I've read. I've spent the last 2 years trying to find like correct, timely correspondence that happened and reports that happened towards the end of Weimar Republic and beginning of Nazi Germany. And what people talked about and the way the news was written was 100% in the same kind of vein. And it's one of the things I'm consistently seeing as I look through it. I look through what happened in a lot of other fascist takeovers elsewhere. You have this very particular line where the opposition is trying to stop fascism instead of just doing good governance and doing things, which sounds stupid because it's like, well, don't you want to prevent it? And it's like, preventing it creates the situation that enables it.
There is a road from good governance to prevent fascism. Argument I would make that gets lost. Because if you
a microcosm of this is something that I can at least relate this to is when, for instance, you see all the appeals to we need to confer social media companies with all of these extra powers to crack down upon fascists so that fascists won't organize on social media platforms, when instead it's like, well, they're not. The cause of fascism amongst the population here isn't social media. It's all of this other shit behind in the grounded world that these people are living in.
Yes.
Social media is just the font through which that is being, at present, channeled. You don't fix fascism by outlawing the Sieg Heil salute. You fix fascism by breaking apart capitalism and
where it gets though is, and it's the way that the falling back on all of it happens. So you make the Sieg Heil salute as an example. You're not allowed to do that, and then the way that it's enforced, because the people who become troublemakers naturally are people who are anti-state, just like we saw with. You don't see a lot of Israelis,
and you don't
see a lot of pro-Israeli people protesting. The people who are protesting are the people who want change. And then those laws get used against those people. In the same way that you can't do the Sieg Heil salute, and someone does the black power fist pump in the air, and it's like, you're getting arrested. Sorry, buddy. And now
also, not just that, you also get a whole new suite of tactics and play around the rule that has been brought in to organize and regulate. You get people trying to put their toe on the line, use it as a new provocation, test authority, and solicit attention to themselves and to their to their politics. So I think we can concur on that point that, good governance, and not necessarily the fight against fascism, but rather the fight to improve the world that we live in, is integral, not just at a narrative point, but also as a tactical point. How do we, as, frankly, fucking nobody little peoples, engage in that for ourselves, especially when at the, so for instance, in Australia at the moment, it's the Labor government. In the US, it's your Democrats. Now, the Democrat Party, I have many a pejorative to level. But it's similar here in Australia. It's similar here in Australia, where our ostensibly centre-left party is a party of landlords and small business owners, and it is its own centrist, petty tyranny, petty authoritarian type party, and its entanglements and politics are such that I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them, let alone to make, half decent policy that is actually going to, on the whole, better people in the long run and mitigate the vicissitudes of seemingly and increasingly rapacious capitalism.
Well, first thing you can do is subscribe to Two Guys Talking History. It helps.
I have.
But in a serious answer, I think we have ignored for too long the impact of building. So, there are a lot of people. There are people sitting in this audience tonight who have ideas. Run for something. Go do the thing. Get involved. Go. Your voice isn't going to be heard if you're quiet. If you don't participate. We need to participate in those systems, and over time, that's going to start to push it.
One thing I do know about local
I would just say because if I wouldn't even say American, I'm going to be very specific. Have you considered running for local council? I know that's a thing in Australia, the councils and the way that they're structured. It's a thing you can do. And
yes. For myself, I work in a community mental health organization sector, developing policy for getting people to actually be able to afford and access mental health stuff. I also live with a disability as well. So between surviving and
you're
doing
doing
policy
it.
work.
You're doing it.
Absolutely. I wasn't merely doing expressing those questions for myself, so to speak. It's more so bringing up those questions as a positive discourse point for the conversation
absolutely,
that we were having.
I get it. I'm just trying to broadly addressing everyone.
I'm just saying I'm proud of you. That's all.
That's very sweet.
I do want to wind us down. So, any last thoughts from everybody? And I want to say before that,
really,
I am.
That's just because I came on. You son of a bitch.
It's exactly it. I just desperately tried to stop Brooks. Thank you to
you
Scooby for joining as a supporter. I saw that. I talked for a while. Anyway, go ahead.
Just been contently listening.
I guess the final word I would say is that I think people would be really, really surprised at just how crazy powerful local US. It's not a council, but your local, city council positions in the US, insanely powerful. Insanely powerful.
I think
you have a lot of authority.
I think they have
for what is
significant impact on most of Congress and federal government. The federal government gets all the ink, but I think these are the places where a lot governing that affect people's lives happen.
Well, if you want just really simple proof of it, go back and look over how politics has been done in America for the last, 80 years. And take a look specifically how the conservatives have run their local elections and pushed for local everything. There's a reason that they control all of the school board seats. There's a reason they control all of the local elections. It's because they made that their focus. And lo and behold, the people who are the most insane are the loudest. It's a shame. It's the reality. And so when we talk about Trump and others, the Republican Party has been feeding them and dealing with them and sort of playing to them for so long in order to maintain that. And the hard right realized if they were to gain political power, they would end up being able to force out the sort of more traditional right-wing Republicans, the McConnells and others who've been able to maintain just because of their political cachet. So when you start having people like Trump, who literally just now run the party through hyper-populism and the people who are the Tea Party and Sarah Palin, it's an extraordinary path. And so all we need is just people to, and again, I think a big part of it is that people hear that everything's about to fall apart. And so they're like, God, I better leave it to the experts. And they don't realize that there's no one who's that. And so please do something. That's my argument. We're actually fucking things up by saying it's a nightmare.
Yeah, I think that's where the governing that most people need going to happen. Especially the school boards. It's getting feisty, especially here in Colorado. I am in the district that Lauren Boebert is bounced into after realizing she's going to lose her own district.
Quick question, Daedalus. Didn't Marjorie Taylor Greene come up through local council boards and such? Or is that me just hallucinating?
I don't know that one for sure. I'd have to look at that. She seems like a nightmare that was deliberately unleashed on us. In the same vein as Lauren Boebert, who I hope goes away. Unless she wants to take me to the theater. Wait, what? I'm a horrible person.
So specifically, MTG didn't come out through that. She was a fucking QAnon online psychotic.
Right.
Different.
Okay. Yeah.
She literally was like a podcaster for that, if I remember.
Problem. Oh, thank you, Jailing. Order. But we are going on 2.5 hours.
You moderated the Facebook page of the Family America Project. Jesus Christ, I hate this country. God
Avery's
damn it.
Giving me a funny look. He wants to go potty, and it's been a little bit. So I want to thank you guys both for coming out tonight. And thank everybody.
Yeah, thank you both.
We will be back
always.
sometime this
Thanks
week.
for having me.
Yep, have a good night, Brooks.
Thank you kindly for having me on.
Yep. Have a good night, Leo.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. That I want to thank everybody. Have a good night. Subscribe.
Like and subscribe.